Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
Kenneth Marken was an attorney and the coach of Casper's American Legion baseball team when we first met over 30 years ago. Today he is lawyering no longer, but is pursuing his passion as a Wyoming-based filmmaker. We'll meet Wyoming filmmaker Kenneth Marken and, at the end of our interview, see the trailer of his award-winning film That You Had Never Called. It's all next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Hi, I'm Kenneth Marken. I'm a Rocky Mountain-based writer-director living in Casper, Wyoming, where I was born and raised. My production company, Crimson Dawn Productions, is developing a narrative feature film called Little America for production in the winter of 2016. I graduated as a producer fellow from the American Film Institute Conservatory, but most of my directing experience has been gained on the stage, and as a result, my favorite part of directing is working with actors. I've made several short films, the most recent of which played internationally, and in fact won the award for Best Achievement in Direction in Barcelona. Little America is a world cinema film which works on many different levels. On its face, it's a very human story about the journey of two strangers. Roberta is the beautiful but abused mistress of a Florida drug courier, and Bobby is a mysterious, middle-aged, homeless veteran. The two of them are stranded together by a vicious Christmas blizzard at an isolated motel truck stop in southwestern Wyoming. But Little America is also a parable about the restorative power of love and faith, told through a new hybrid of genres from which such a lesson would normally not flow: the erotic thriller and the woman in jeopardy. In the early 1930s, the Little America motel truck stop was built in southwestern Wyoming in a very isolated place and named after Admiral Byrd's base camp established during the early exploration of the South Pole. To Byrd, Little America became a metaphor for his own personal renewal in the face of the very harsh living conditions of the coldest place on earth. So it seemed natural to set my movie in a similarly frigid, icy wasteland in southwestern Wyoming, because it serves the theme of human renewal, that is, the new life to be gained through learning to love another selflessly. We recently held callback auditions with 5 of Spain's most beautiful and talented young actresses. And by assembling an international team of actors and artists, Little America promises to be a cinematically unique film. It will appeal to North American art house audiences, to European audiences, and because of our casting choices, it will appeal to Hispanic audiences, both in the U.S. as well as Latin America. I think it will also be surprisingly popular among young women who will immediately bond to our heroine, her plight, and her resolution.
Wyoming filmmaker Kenneth Marken. Welcome to Wyoming Chronicle.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
You and I first crossed paths maybe 30 years ago on the baseball fields in Wyoming.
Yeah.
You were an attorney at the time.
Yes.
And you're now a filmmaker. Tell me about that process.
Oh, wow. Well, you know, I coached baseball for a long time, Craig, and kind of wrapped up in baseball in the late 70s, and then I had another gig kind of in the middle of the 80s, which was right about the time my oldest child was born, and then I kind of gave it up for a few years. I got back in for a couple of years when my son was Legion age, but after that was it. But it was fun while it lasted. I had some great experiences.
And you were an attorney in Casper for quite a while, but now you've really dedicated your resources in life towards your passion of filmmaking.
Yes, yeah.
Tell me about that.
And also
process.
to theater, you know, I can't ignore that. I did a lot of theater. That's where I've gained most of my directing experience.
So now what are the hallmarks, Ken, of one of your films? If I were to look at Little America or Unaware or That You Had Never Called, what am I going to see now in a Kenneth Marken film?
Well, I think thematically you're always going to run into a story where that is about the restorative power of love. And I don't mean to sound highbrow when I talk about that. I think that my stories are almost always very personal. That is personal in terms of relating to the characters. They're people you want to know, that you get to know, that you want to empathize with. And I think that one of the things that I've always been interested in is how we cope with the estrangements that we create in our lives, whether we become, you know, estranged from ourselves or our friends or our family or God or whatever it might be. My characters are generally find themselves in that predicament, and the story is about how they work out of it. And I guess the reason that I'm more interested in that kind of thing is because of my theater background. There's not a lot of car chases and explosions in the theater. You have to deal with what it is to be a human being, and so that's what interests me.
Kenneth, you've been at this really for a majority of your time since the 90s. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, I mean, I started, I shot my first short when I was in college at the University of Oklahoma, and I won't even tell you when that was. But I'd been in and out of theater several times in law school, and then when after I became an attorney here in Casper, Wyoming PBS did a show this past season about Gertie at 30, about the Gertrude Crampert Theater. And one of my close friends in life is Tom Empey, because I was in the very first summer musical at Crampert Theater in 1987. A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. So anyway, because of my connection with theater, after I'd practiced law for about 10 years, I up and went to grad school in Los Angeles at the American Film Institute. Moved my family, my wife took a leave of absence and taught school in Valencia, California. And after I graduated, we came back here because, you know, living in Los Angeles is not exactly compatible for somebody who grew up in Casper, Wyoming. And it just didn't seem like a good place to raise kids or anything else. So we came back here. Probably 4 or 5 years after we came back, I spent writing screenplays and trying to develop my projects into feature films. Little America is one of the old ones. And so we came very close. We actually shot a short of Little America in 1994 at the old Ramada Inn, which at that time was called the Downtowner. It's now called the Parkway Plaza, but we shot a short of it. It's a film that takes place during a blizzard, and we shot it during the President's Day weekend. There was not a flake of snow to be found in Casper, Wyoming. And so one of the scenes where the heroine is out traipsing through this blizzard, we went up to Casper Mountain near Camp Sacagawea, the Girl Scout camp, and we shot it up there, and you'd think you were in Antarctica for all the snow. And the great thing was your technicians will appreciate that, we actually tied our electric right into the electric for the Girl Scout camp, so we didn't need a generator. It was great.
Yeah. You've said, Ken, and you develop films in Wyoming, you want to develop films in Wyoming. You've also said that good actors want good material. Can those two come together in Wyoming in your vision of what it is you want to do?
Well, I hope so, because otherwise my features won't come to life. But yeah, one of the things that I took away from my experience at the AFI, which all of our actors were Screen Actor Guild actors, and from those people that I worked with, that really solidified for me that they care about the characters, they care about the stories. And unfortunately, the kinds of movies that Hollywood generally offers, they may be well paying, but there's not a lot of depth to car chases and explosions, and people who are really into being actors and into finding the truths of the human condition, they want to do stories that are about real people and that give them the opportunity to expand their crafts. So anyway, I think that once we have enough capital to make it happen, we're going to get some good actors. I know this just from the people that I've touched base with so far in trying to cast Little America.
What are the challenges of doing it here in Wyoming that are problematic for you, whether it's infrastructure or other things that you have to plan for?
Yeah, well, that's the big thing. Wyoming, unfortunately, is very lacking in infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean competent crews, competent cast, equipment. We are essentially a location, and we have a whole variety of great looks. But unfortunately, the reason I think that filmmaking hasn't taken off here is because you have to bring in everybody to make your movie and put them up in motels, feed them, house them. Whereas if you are working near a major metropolitan area, you can send your crew home at night and they can sleep in their own beds and eat their own food. And so your cost structure are much different. And you combine that with the incentives that are involved in Wyoming versus different jurisdictions, different states, or even the provinces in Canada. It makes it really tough to financially justify making films in Wyoming or making television programs. I think one of the big challenges, and I say this, I have a good relationship, as far as I know, with the Wyoming Film Commission, but I'm not sure that the way we're going about it right now is really going to produce a vibrant film infrastructure that's capable of really helping out the state. It's one thing for Quentin Tarantino and the Weinstein brothers to bring their film company here to shoot Jamie Foxx, out in front of the Tetons for a couple of weeks. But in essence, what do they leave here? They had their hotel rooms and they ate and they had fuel and probably bought a cowboy hat or some cowboy boots. But the state of Wyoming gave them 15% of their costs and they went off. But in essence, how is that any different than a busload of tourists from Japan or from Atlanta, Georgia? They come through, they stay in motels and eat food and use fuel, and then they leave too. If we're not training people here in Wyoming, if we're not leaving some kind of
infrastructure upon which the industry can, regenerate, then I'm not sure that we're accomplishing much. And I think the only way that's really going to happen is if there is an infusion of Wyoming capital into the film and television
And you're not
business.
talking about just public infusion.
No, absolutely not. I'm talking about private. There's a lot of capital in this state. When I was a kid, Casper had more millionaires per capita than any city in the United States. Now, I'm sure it's not that way anymore, but from Casper to Jackson, from Sheridan, there's a lot of capital that would be available that could be available to putting in the film and television business. And I want to emphasize television, even though that's not an area that I aspire to. Look at the television show Longmire. It's written by a Wyoming author. It's set in beautiful Absaraka County, and yet it's made in New Mexico. And I don't think anything has ever been shot here. Well, there are so many opportunities for television programming worldwide because, I don't know if I just watched the opening episode of Downton Abbey on your show, on your network. And they were talking about how they had sold that show in 250 countries around the world. Now, I'm not saying we're going to make the next Downton Abbey at the Sheridan Inn, but if we sold it to 25 countries around the world, that could be a successful TV show. And if you have a TV show that is shooting 5 and 6 months out of the year, then you have a crew that will form a connection to Wyoming. Maybe they're from Wyoming, or maybe they decide they want to live here because of the quality of life that it affords.
You've had some connections in Wyoming that you've resurfaced in some of the films that you've done before. What's changed for you since the early 90s when you really got into film to today, and how you go about trying to fund and then produce and make real the projects that you have in mind?
Well, there's a lot of differences. One of the big differences is that the production of digital imagery now is, in the 90s, we shot everything on film. The short of Little America we shot on 16 millimeter. And the Avid editing system, that was one of the first films I ever cut using that digital system. So the technology is vastly different. And I think there's less opportunities in some of the traditional theatrical markets that there were then, but there are far more television opportunities with the expansiveness of cable and now with the internet, although I don't know a whole lot about how to make money on the internet with film. There are people apparently who are doing it.
So what is your goal with your films? Is it to be on TV? Is it to be in movie theaters? What's your goal?
Well, I feel like the stories that I want to tell are stories that people who enjoy cinema and the art that cinema represents will enjoy seeing in a theater. I think they'll enjoy seeing them on television. I don't think they are necessarily the films that you would want to watch on your iWatch or whatever your iHand is. Because why would you want to see Wyoming on a screen that's as big as my hand? Wyoming is so vast and beautiful, and so that's what I want to showcase as, a Wyoming guy.
Your next two projects, Unaware and Little America, very different types of films. Let's talk about those for just a moment.
Okay. They are. Although I go back to, in many ways, thematically, they're very much the same. They're about, just as this film is about a woman who has raised her kids as a single mom and has, essentially put her life on hold, and now things are rekindled for her, and she's learning that by loving and forgiving, her life can be restored, and that estrangement can be eliminated or reduced. Little America is a story about two very different strangers who become stranded during a Christmas blizzard at a very isolated motel truck stop. One stranger is the young mistress of a drug courier traveling westward to Reno with a load of drugs, and the other stranger is a middle-aged homeless vet. And both of them feel that their lives are very determined and set, and feel very much a prisoner of that. And it isn't until they are forced to kind of confront that in their 2 or 3 days together that they learn that there maybe is a different path and a different way to celebrate life. Unaware is a family film. It's kind of, I say it's a modern Western take on It's a Wonderful Life. It tells a story of a Wyoming rancher and his wife who many years earlier had lost their only child in a freak accident. And now some 20 years later, the rancher himself has never fully recovered from the guilt that he feels about that loss. And he's let his ranch slip into decline. His wife is now in ill health, and so he decides he's going to sell his ranch. And they hire a young waif of a cowgirl who shows up to apply for the job. And what they don't realize is that, and never will realize until the very end of the film, is that the cowgirl is an angel who has come to help, believing that she can help the rancher restore his broken spirit. So anyway, it's a very sweet film, but it's not, it deals with some profound topics about accepting what life brings us and takes away, and adjusting to that, and learning to love yourself and through loving others.
Kenneth, you wrote the screenplay for all of these films, and you also participate in casting. You do a lot as an independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
What aspects do you most enjoy in this process?
Oh, well, my favorite part, I like writing, but my favorite part of filmmaking is working with the actors. I love casting. I love working with them on developing their characters and exploring all the things that we want to explore about their characters and how that fits into the story. And I guess that comes again from the experience that I have. I'm a bad actor myself, and so I enjoy working with good people, and so I guess that's my favorite part.
Is that also one of the hardest parts for you to do, for being based here in Wyoming, is that casting component?
Well, yeah, because especially in film, there really are very few trained, competent film actors in the state of Wyoming. Casting is a very project-specific situation, and so most actors your prominent actors are going to come from Los Angeles or New York or someplace pretty major. I think for most features, I would probably be hard-pressed to cast more than 5 small roles of actors from Wyoming. But I think I can cast most of them from Colorado, Denver, and the like, but except for the stars, of course. And obviously they're going to come from larger places.
So your plan is to do serious work on both of these films in the coming year?
Yeah, I think my primary focus is Little America, but you got to keep juggling all the balls to keep them in the air and keep some momentum going. Just to go back to what we were talking about on the casting side, not long before Thanksgiving this past year, I happened to run into a young woman who is an aspiring writer, producer, actress. She's from Casper and has family up in the Jackson area too. And she made a feature film in Jackson, I think within the last year and a half, that just came out on Amazon. So we had coffee before Thanksgiving, and I said to her early on, I said, so tell me about your experience. And one of the first things she said is, you know, if I had it to do over again, I would make sure that I had a name in my film. And I think that's something that a lot of...
A star, if you will.
A star, yeah. Somebody who has name recognition, at least in whatever genre it is that you're making. It's almost impossible to make a film that will get any kind of commercial attention, much less critical attention, if you don't have a name in your cast. And there's very few exceptions. Maybe the horror genre, maybe to some extent the faith-based genre can function without stars. But most of the time, you've got to have somebody that, when the people go to Redbox and say, oh yeah, Joe Blow's in that, I know him, I've seen his stuff, I will watch his movies. And that's why casting a male star for Little America is so critical to the success of that film.
In addition to these films, are you still writing? Is there something else always on the horizon in your mind?
You know, one of the things that I've actually been doing is I've been trying to adapt Unaware to the stage. And we're making some progress on that. I don't know if I'm going to have it, you know, ready to go for 2016, but that's been, I probably spent more time writing that of late than anything else I've been doing.
Kenneth Marken, it's been a pleasure visiting with you today on Wyoming Chronicle, and best wishes for continued success in your journey.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share all this with you.
Dear Mr. Samuels, I doubt that you remember me, so I won't bother to sign my name. But I will never forget that night you called. This seat taken?
Oh, hi. No, no.
We might have an extra for dinner. Some friend of Mom's.
Were you planning on running into me again?
Pardon?
Yeah, Mom invited a complete stranger over for Thanksgiving dinner.
Wow. I can't believe I just said that.
Well, what makes some oil-filled trash?
Let me help you with that.
Oh.
What kind of creep hits on strange women in grocery stores?
My name's Tom Darden, by the way.
I'm Evelyn Perry. Try to be nice, Winnie. I'll make sure he wipes his feet.
So, did you have a meaningful relationship with your children, Mr. Darden?
Oh, hi, Daddy. Yeah, we're all eating dinner right now.
4 kids in college. It's pretty crazy.
You must be very proud of them.
I am. They're really good kids.
Hi.
Hey.